the opt-out process procedure. So once that state plan is delivered, as I mentioned, 90 days for the governor to look at, decide if they want to accept the FirstNet provided plan or opt out. If they decide to opt out, there's 6 months for the state to develop their own plan. And the opt-out plan must be basically, show equivalent or how they're going to address a lot of the same components or aspects of the plan that was provided by FirstNet. So both from a technical and physical capability to operate the network, how it will be maintained with ongoing interoperability and connectivity to the nationwide network, that they've got the capacity to complete the project, that will still be cost effective, comparable in cost and deliver the same resources and capability performance. And then it will have comparable security, coverage, quality of service. So that's why that plan will have all those components that go into the build out of a network, and if the state opts out, that will be measured against all those similar components in the plan. So once the state, if they choose to opt out, you build up a separate plan. That plan is submitted. The FCC actually is the one that will approve the plan. If you approve the plan, you go forward. The state can apply for a grant to get some of those funds to actually build out the network. If the plan is disapproved, then you go back to the plan that was provided by FirstNet. So any questions on opt-out? One of the big questions on this has always been, well, if the state opts out and the revenue that's generated from the network, just like FirstNet's requirement, if the states opt out, all proceeds or revenue from the network that's generated must go back into the network. So any state that opts out and builds out their own RAN and maintains their own RAN, all fees will go back into that network. Just like FirstNet, any fees, it's not a for-profit organization. All proceeds from the network go back into the network. All right, so we've talked a little bit about SLIG-P. There's a lot of activities for phase 1. That's the phase that's going on right now. Establishing your governance, making sure you've got representation with local stakeholders, outreach education, identifying users. You can see them all here. There's a lot of activities. Users is one that is an allowable activity, and that's another one that was going to be requested early in this process from FirstNet, so that's another focus area that we'll get into later today. And at the end of the day, this is kind of the vision for what it looks like. So you've got the FirstNet core that's been built out that covers, connectivity throughout the whole nation, and then you have these 56 state and territory RAN designs that were negotiated, and provided to the state, agreed upon, and then built out within each state. And whether that was a FirstNet built RAN or a state who maybe opt-out RAN, they all eventually still connect back into the same core so that you have this nationwide network, regardless of how the local RANs were built out. So that's kind of the big vision, tying this all back together at the end of the day. So any questions on any of that we've discussed? Because this will be now where we'll kind of jump into the next topic of discussion.
Not so much a question, but first of all, it sounds like number one, regardless of what happens, we've got to do this period. We're either doing it through FirstNet or we're doing it through the state.
Say that again, I'm sorry?
First of all, it looks like we're going to have to do this no matter what, either through FirstNet or through the state.
I got you.
Okay. So I think, when we spoke earlier, you said the pricing, the cost on this would be comparable to what we're currently getting through our local systems. I would probably submit it'd have to be lower because this I know works. This looks like healthcare.gov for my data. Okay?
Right.
So that's a big concern, especially for rural agencies like ours.
Absolutely.
Now I have to invest money in new systems, and I know when P25 became the standard, my radio cost doubled. So that's the concern I see coming from a rural agency perspective is now I've got something mandated that I have to do, but all my costs are now going to double. And I derive no extra benefit from having to buy all that P25 equipment because the infrastructure isn't there to support it. Yeah. In our area, we have two primary providers for the data services, Verizon and Cell One. But for instance, White Mountain Apache Tribe, Cell One, it's an exclusive use zone. So the minute you cross over the reservation with Verizon, it's done. We're talking about leveraging. So are we looking at incorporating incorporating those Verizon and cell phone sites that already exist to support this new process, or are we going to have to look at building right along next to all of this?
No, so a lot of good questions, a lot of points. I'll try to hit on them. If I missed any, please, let me know. So on the last one there, certainly they want to look at existing sites. So a Verizon site, for example, Verizon really doesn't own a lot of their sites. They lease sites from tower companies. So those tower companies can lease space to FirstNet or whoever else, just like they do to Verizon today. So that they plan to target, a lot of those same companies, but they've got the ability where they can also go with, state, local, tribal assets as well. So on those, the tribal lands, for example, if they've got a tower site there and they want to make sure they have coverage for FirstNet within their, area, then they can potentially negotiate something to use those sites. So there's a lot of potential to get on a lot more sites that maybe typical commercial carriers don't have, but they will be, leveraging as many assets as they can to provide the coverage that they need. As far as the cost and the confidence that users will have, I don't disagree with you at all. I mean, that's a huge area that FirstNet knows that they're going to have to build up that trust and confidence of the public safety community before they ever migrate over. And the difference between that P25 example you had is that there's a lot more competition in this market, right? Because they can continue using their commercial services today, whereas in the P25 example, they really didn't have a lot of other options. So that you're kind of stuck with maybe incurring some of those additional costs. But in this, if the cost is twice as much, you're probably not going to get a lot of people leaving their commercial services to pay twice as much for access to this network. So, I understand the challenges, and I agree with you. It's different, but I think there are some differences that might make it where it won't be some following past history.
And Chris, just to clarify one thing, the law requires that the network be built, whether it's by FirstNet or the state opting out the state. The law does not require public safety participation.
Right.
So that's going to be a key driver for FirstNet to keep costs down. Certainly, default standards and desire for interoperability will be a driver to get everybody participating. There's not a requirement that your agency is going to have to be on that. So that's why this planning is so critical, which we figure out ways to do it that the coverage will be right, that the cost can be down, and make it a viable option for
Well, and Mike, I understand the law doesn't have any, the law doesn't have any
over time.
if I want the money. So
Exactly.
that's, I see some concern. That would be my concern.
Yeah.
We have to take more to get something that doesn't necessarily increase what I've already got.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's definitely more kind of the commercial model from the standpoint of they're going to try to get as much input as they can from you, and then build up a network or a system to provide service to you, and then you can choose whether or not you want to use it or not. So there's no additional cost that you have to incur to help get that service built up. You just have the unique opportunity to provide that input to make sure that it's going to meet what your needs are.
And that's why the knowledge is so critical for it doesn't come out, it doesn't talk to you guys. It's not going to know what your requirements are to start with. What's more what you're using paying right now. And if they don't get that, they can't have a cost model when they roll it out. Like Brian was saying, they roll it out and it's twice the money for who knows, maybe not any more capability. Yeah, from this model, you're not going to go. Why would they know that? That's what's really
Yeah, question for that?
Yeah, from a radio application longer term.
Yeah.
Radio application, would our equipment have to be compatible to operate within the 700 megahertz?
Yes, most definitely. So today there's not a lot of equipment out there that's capable of operating in that band 14 or band class 14. So you in order to operate on this network, you'd have to procure equipment that would be capable to operate on it. So yeah, down the road, right, when they get the data, and a lot of people associate, cell phones and stuff. There's no reason that you couldn't still have some of the old form factors that users are used to using today, and they're just capable of operating on this new network, an LTE network. In fact, that's what some of the providers providers are already doing today, building radios that will be capable of operating on both LTE and P25, for example, to kind of bridge that gap.
We have a little bit of an issue with that, and when we have our opportunity for outreach, we'll explain this, we can't have those kind of devices on it.
Not allowed.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep,
We have to think radios, we have to, that's why I'm asking, and I missed the determination of how long it before the consideration would be.
I get you. So there's two ways to answer that question of when LMR would kind of get introduced. So in the near term, one of the big questions is how will LMR be integrated into the network? So maybe the legacy users on their LMR networks can still support voice communications between the two networks. So that's definitely an area that's being looked at. So how do you continue to operate and leverage your existing networks, but tie them into this network? So if you do have users maybe operating, making a phone call, they could still tie into maybe some of those channels or talk groups on your LMR systems. So that LMR to LTE connection would be kind of the first way to bridge that gap. Down the road, when this all becomes one consolidated network, way down the road, I specifically did not give a time frame for that because no one really knows. I mean, it's a really good question of when it would be available. It'll be several years before you can really, not only would the technology support it, but as we've talked about, when the community would trust it and start to adopt it. So, another question? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the PSAC. I work with fire service and PSAC. One of the things that you were mentioning was the cost associated with devices and access fees and those kinds of things. Things that we're recognizing is that it does have to be competitive. You might pay a little more because of security and local control and things, but the thing is you don't have to change the whole fee. You can change over, some of it on commercial. Identify key users that will be on. Question about the mission critical fire service is a difficult position. Our device could have to go in. You're telling us decades. It's not a situation where you need to put dump your money into form factor that you need. Andrews will have to develop that with the manufacturer.
Just so I'm clear on that, I have to think about this. Saying that, let's take FirstNet up. Now they're going to have a voice key. That for your corrections officer, they would truly need it LMR only. You wouldn't actually want them to have so there is that device. Okay.
There's a potential for them at any moment to be taken by the entity. My concern also is that it may not be an issue, but this can probably just and that is in our building construction materials and even our building. They're not. This range is not conducive to us doing our job.
Right.
And that's what this workshop does.
Exactly. So those are exact. So we'll talk about that later, actually in the next section, on the coverage component. But on the devices uniqueness, that's going to be a really good example of something you'd want to bring up in the consultation process to identify all those unique requirements that you need to operate with. So because I mentioned earlier on, they're already working on devices, and that's going to be an area they can focus on, but they recognize that there's going to be some unique device requirements, and those are great ones to make sure that they're aware of and have captured.
What the PSAC really wants to do is the identification, the security, the traffic, the person not necessarily the device.
I've been, Michael will tell you, I've been voicing it each other. So I heard you say about 10 years. Yeah.
I didn't say 10 years.
Well,
No, but from a...
no sooner than 10 years that I
really tough to estimate. I mean, I think I don't think there's any way it's going to be any sooner than 5 or 6 years. 10 years is kind of the general rule. I think that's entirely reasonable. But you know, as this process evolves, and some of those key drivers that are driving those developments in that area that will make this potentially public safety grade and to support mission critical voice, there'll be a lot more information, and so that the estimation of when it'll be available will be better. Right now, it's really difficult to estimate. So I think 10 years is probably the best guess at this point. Any other questions? All right, this I think is a good time to take a break. So maybe we can go take say like 10 minutes. 10 or 15. Yeah, 10, 15 minutes. Bring it back, and then we'll get started then on the coverage and the user discussion. Did you want to say anything before?